Walter Jennings moved slowly but with a quiet dignity, his steps measured and careful as he made his way down Maple Street. His right hand gripped the worn wooden handle of a cane, while his left held the leash of Buddy, a golden retriever whose coat shimmered like sunlight. Walter's eyes, sharp and clear despite his 90 years, scanned the familiar surroundings of the quiet neighborhood, where he had lived for over 4 decades. Every morning, like clockwork, Walter left his small but sturdy house just after dawn. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of blooming lilacs and freshly cut grass. This walk was more than just a routine. It was a sacred ritual that connected him to a life both past and present. The rhythmic tapping of his cane on the cracked sidewalk mixed with Buddy's soft paws pattering beside him. Walter was a Marine veteran. His story was etched not only in his weathered face, but in the pride he carried in his stance and the careful way he arranged his old Marine Corps cap on the dashboard of his pickup truck each day. Though his uniform hung in a closet now, it was never far from his mind. The values of discipline, courage, and brotherhood that had shaped his youth still shaped his quiet moments. Most neighbors knew Walter as a gentle soul with a calm smile. Children would wave as he passed by, and he always nodded back, his eyes twinkling. Local shop owners had grown to recognize him too, often greeting him with a respectful, "Good morning, sir." Walter rarely spoke much, but his presence alone brought a sense of steadiness to the block. Buddy, Walter's faithful companion, was more than a pet. He was a guardian and a friend. The dog had an uncanny ability to sense when Walter was tired or feeling low. During their walks, Buddy would occasionally stop to sniff a patch of grass or greet another dog, but he was always attentive, always close. Walter found comfort in this silent partnership, especially as age made some days harder than others. This particular morning felt like any other. Walter had already fed Buddy and enjoyed a simple breakfast of toast and coffee. His routine was his anchor in a world that seemed to move faster every year. As he stepped outside, the sun cast a warm glow over the maple trees lining the street. Birds chirped softly, and the faint sound of a lawnmower hummed in the distance. Walter and Buddy headed toward the corner bakery, a place Walter often stopped for a newspaper and a small pastry. The bakery was owned by Mrs. Thompson, a kindly woman in her 70s who always saved a piece of apple pie for Walter, knowing it was his favorite treat. Walter's slow, steady steps toward the shop were a familiar sight. Passing the neighbors' homes, Walter noticed the freshly painted white fence next door and the new flowers in Mrs. Lopez's garden. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful. He allowed himself a moment to remember the friends who had moved away or passed on over the years. But the memories were bittersweet rather than painful, reminders of a life rich with experience. Walter's mind briefly wandered to his years in the Marines, the early mornings at boot camp, the tough training, the camaraderie forged in far-off places. Those memories never left him. They were part of his foundation. But now he was far from any battlefield, living a life marked by small, meaningful routines. As he rounded the corner toward the bakery, Buddy tugged slightly on the leash, eager to reach the familiar door. Walter smiled softly, grateful for the dog's companionship. He adjusted his cap to shield his eyes from the sun and prepared to cross the street carefully, cane first. Everything seemed calm and ordinary. The neighborhood was beginning to stir with the start of the day. Children would soon board the school bus, and neighbors would open their shops and garages. But just around that corner, Walter's peaceful routine was about to be shattered, a moment that would change everything and remind a whole community of the true meaning of honor and brotherhood. Walter Jennings approached the corner bakery, with Buddy at his side, the familiar smells of fresh bread and sweet pastries drifting through the morning air. He adjusted his Marine Corps cap as he neared the crosswalk, gripping his cane firmly. The neighborhood was waking up, birdsong mingled with distant chatter, and the steady hum of traffic echoed softly down the street. Buddy's tail wagged as he sensed their destination was near. Walter smiled faintly, grateful for the dog's loyal companionship. Crossing the street required care, and Walter had learned to watch for speeding cars and distracted drivers. Today the traffic seemed light, but Walter's eyes stayed sharp. As he stepped off the curb, then without warning everything changed. A young man emerged from the shadow of a nearby alley, his face twisted in anger and impatience. Walter barely had time to react before the man shoved him hard in the back. The sudden force sent Walter stumbling backward, his cane slipping from his grasp. His feet scrambled for footing on the uneven pavement. Walter's heart pounded as he teetered dangerously close to the curb. Buddy barked loudly, leaping forward as if to protect his owner. The golden retriever's growl cut through the morning calm, drawing the attention of nearby pedestrians. Cars rushed past, their drivers honking and swerving to avoid the elderly man who was now struggling to regain his balance. Walter's hands shook as he tried to steady himself on the edge of the street, his breaths coming short and sharp. For a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. Walter's mind flashed back to far different battles, fierce fights in cold mountains and distant deserts, but this was no battlefield. This was his home, and he was vulnerable in a way no soldier wanted to be. The young man, face flushed with anger, spat words that none could hear clearly as he turned and stormed off down the street. Walter's legs wobbled beneath him, but with a trembling hand he grasped the curb and pulled himself upright. Buddy nuzzled his side, whimpering softly as if asking, "Are you okay, sir?" A nearby woman rushed forward, her face full of concern. "Mr. Jennings, are you hurt?" she asked, steadying him gently. Walter nodded, though a sharp sting in his hip told him the shove had left a mark. Slowly, with the woman's help, Walter retrieved his cane and began to walk again. Buddy stayed close, eyes watchful. Other neighbors had gathered, murmuring quietly amongst themselves. Shock and disbelief painted their faces. No one expected such cruelty in their peaceful street. Walter's pride burned quietly beneath his calm exterior. The shove wasn't just a physical blow. It was a violation of his dignity, a disrespect to a man who had given so much for his country. Yet Walter kept his composure, refusing to show anger or fear. The bakery owner, Mrs. Thompson, appeared with a warm blanket and a cup of tea. "Walter, you're going to be okay," she said softly. "We're here for you." Walter's gaze drifted to Buddy, who wagged his tail tentatively. The dog's loyalty was unwavering, a steady comfort in a moment of vulnerability. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Walter sat on a nearby bench, gathering strength. A few people took out their phones, whispering about what had just happened. A young man who had witnessed the entire incident began recording, his voice trembling with emotion as he spoke. "This is Walter Jennings, a Marine veteran who was just shoved into the street. He didn't deserve this. We need to do something." The video captured more than the shove. It captured the courage of a 90-year-old man standing tall against injustice, the loyalty of a dog who refused to leave his side, and the quiet heartbreak of a community shaken to its core. Walter's mind raced as he replayed the moment. Was this an isolated act of anger, or a symptom of something deeper? Was he truly alone? But somewhere inside, a flicker of hope ignited. He remembered the brothers and sisters he had served with, the bond that never broke, even after decades. If one person could do this, then maybe others could rise to his defense, and rise they would. The shove was just the beginning, a spark that would light a fire of solidarity and kindness, led by the very Marines who had sworn to protect each other no matter what. Walter squeezed Buddy's leash tighter and rose to his feet. This fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. The video of Walter Jennings' shove didn't just capture a moment. It captured a powerful message. Within hours, the footage was shared across social media platforms, sparking an outpouring of support and outrage. The teenage bystanders, simple words, "This Marine was pushed into traffic today, let's stand with him," became a rallying cry that spread like wildfire. Walter, unaware at first of the growing storm online, sat quietly in his small living room, with Buddy curled at his feet. The old television played a local news broadcast featuring the clip. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for his Marine Corps cap, touching its faded brim. The post attracted thousands of shares and comments, many from veterans and active military personnel who recognized the emblem on Walter's hat and felt an immediate bond. "That's one of ours," read one comment. "We don't let one of our own walk alone." Messages flooded in from cities far beyond Walter's quiet neighborhood. Marines from different states reached out, promising to support the elderly veteran who had once stood on the front lines for their country. The comment section became a virtual brotherhood, filled with stories of service, sacrifice, and loyalty. Walter's story quickly caught the attention of local news outlets, which contacted his neighbors for interviews. Mrs. Thompson, the bakery owner, spoke about his kindness and the injustice of the attack. "Walter is the heart of this community," she said. "We have to protect him." Within a day, a group of Marines, some retired, some still serving, organized through social, media and local veteran groups to meet at Walter's home. The invitation was simple but clear. No Marine gets left behind. Walter, initially overwhelmed by the sudden attention, was hesitant when the first group knocked on his door. He wasn't used to asking for help, having spent a lifetime standing on his own. But seeing the genuine concern in the eyes of the men and women in uniform, his defenses softened. One of the Marines, Sergeant Lisa Ramirez, a tough but kind woman who had served 2 tours overseas, spoke gently. "Sir, we're here to make sure you're safe, to walk with you, help you, and watch your back. You stood for us, now we stand for you." The presence of the Marines brought Walter a deep, unspoken comfort. They didn't just arrive as strangers. They came as family. They carried the invisible threads of shared history, respect, and unbreakable loyalty. Soon, Walter's daily walks transformed from solitary strolls to guarded missions with a group of Marines accompanying him. Buddy seemed to understand the change too, walking proudly alongside the uniformed men and women who surrounded his owner. The neighborhood buzzed with renewed energy as news spread. Volunteers offered to help with chores around Walter's house. Local businesses donated meals. The community's small acts of kindness wove together into a safety net of support. The story even reached veterans organizations and military charities, which sent resources and offered assistance. Walter's humble life was now touched by the powerful reach of a community united. Yet amid all this, Walter remained grounded. He greeted each Marine with a nod and a story from his past, his voice steady but warm. The brotherhood he once knew in the heat of battle was alive again, not on foreign soil, but right on his own street. Walter's journey had taken a sudden turn, from a quiet, solitary walk to the center of a movement. The shove that could have broken his spirit instead ignited a wave of compassion and solidarity, and as the sun set each evening, Walter would sit on his porch with Buddy, watching the neighborhood light up with hope. He realized then that no matter how old he was, or how far from the battlefield he had come, the bonds of service and honor never faded. They only grew stronger. The morning sun had barely peeked over the horizon when a line of vehicles rolled slowly down Walter Jennings' quiet street. It wasn't a parade or an official ceremony. It was something far more meaningful. A group of Marines, some in uniform and others dressed casually but wearing the unmistakable look of service, had come to Walter's doorstep. They came in trucks, cars, and even a couple of motorcycles, their arrival quiet but commanding. One by one they stepped out and formed a respectful line along Walter's front yard, hands raised in salute. A few carried small flags, others brought groceries and home repairs tools. The message was clear: no Marine would stand alone. Walter watched from his porch, his cane resting against the railing, Buddy sitting loyally at his feet. He felt a swell of emotion, surprise, gratitude, and a deep sense of belonging. This was more than support. It was a living reminder of the brotherhood that had shaped him for a lifetime. Sergeant Lisa Ramirez, the Marine who had first reached out to Walter, approached him with a warm smile. "We're here to make sure you're taken care of, sir. No one should ever feel unsafe in their own home." She handed Walter a package of fresh groceries, carefully selected by a local food bank in coordination with the Marines. Walter accepted the package, his weathered hands steady despite the surge of feeling inside. "Thank you," he said softly. "I never expected this." Buddy wagged his tail, sensing the kindness in the air. The Marines didn't just come to visit, they stayed. For days they helped around Walter's home, fixing the sagging fence that had long been in disrepair and painting the porch steps to brighten the old house's weathered exterior. They mowed the lawn, cleared the gutters, and carried out small Repairs Walter had been postponing for months. More importantly, they walked with him every day. No longer was Walter a solitary figure on the sidewalk. Instead, a protective circle of Marines flanked him as he strolled the neighborhood. They exchanged stories, jokes, and sometimes just walked in comfortable silence. The neighbors watched with admiration and curiosity. Some came forward to thank the Marines, others brought food or small gifts. The street, once quiet and routine, buzzed with renewed life. It wasn't just about Walter anymore, it was about community, respect, and healing. One afternoon, a young Marine named Private First Class Jamie Nguyen sat with Walter on the porch, listening intently as Walter recounted a story from his service days. "We had this one mission," Walter said, eyes distant but bright, "where we were trapped for hours, surrounded, but we never gave up. That's what being a Marine is all about, never leaving a brother behind." Jamie nodded, eyes wide with respect. "I hope I can be as strong as you one day, sir." Walter smiled, a rare softness in his gaze. "Strength isn't just about fighting," he said. "It's about standing up for each other, especially when times are tough." Buddy lay between them, content and calm, as the two generations shared, a moment that bridged decades of service. As days turned to weeks, the Marines' presence became a reassuring constant in Walter's life. Their visits helped ease the loneliness that had crept in over the years. Walter found himself laughing more, sharing stories and wisdom with those who had come to protect him. The once isolated veteran had become the heart of a new brotherhood, one that didn't rely on uniforms or battlefields, but on kindness, respect, and the simple truth that no Marine is ever truly alone. And as the sun set over Maple Street, Walter realized that this unexpected chapter of his life was not just about receiving help. It was about giving others the chance to show what it meant to be part of something greater, a family forged by honor, loyalty, and love. Walter Jennings's quiet street began to buzz with something it hadn't known in years, a sense of purpose and unity. What started as a simple act of kindness from a handful of Marines had sparked a movement that swept through the entire neighborhood, weaving a new fabric of respect and care. Neighbors who once passed each other with quick nods now stopped to chat and share stories. The shyness of routine had melted away, replaced by warm greetings and small gestures of kindness. The old block was waking up, and it was because of Walter. At the local diner, a new sign hung proudly in the window, "Free coffee for veterans." Mrs. Garcia, the owner, had heard Walter's story on the news and was determined to honor him and others who had served. Every morning, Walter was greeted with a steaming cup, a slice of fresh pie, and the respect he had long deserved. Children, inspired by the tales of courage they heard from their parents and teachers, created colorful posters decorated with flags, medals, and words like honor, respect, and thank you. These posters were taped to windows, lampposts, and bulletin boards all over town. The energy was contagious. One sunny afternoon, a group of neighborhood kids approached Walter as he sat on his porch, Buddy at his side. "Mr. Jennings, we made this for you," they said in unison, holding up a large handmade banner. It read, "Our hero, our friend." Walter's eyes welled with tears as he reached out to shake each child's hand. The warmth in their smiles reminded him that his story had found new life in the youngest generation. The sense of community blossomed further when local businesses began stepping up. The hardware store donated supplies to help the Marines repair Walter's home. The florist arranged a daily delivery of fresh flowers to brighten his porch. The library hosted a reading event where veterans shared stories of their service, bridging past and present with heartfelt narratives. Even the city council took notice. A proposal was quickly drafted to improve pedestrian safety on Maple Street. New crosswalks, better lighting, and slower speed zones. The shove that had once shaken Walter's world had ignited a chain reaction of care and protection. Neighbors who had once lived quietly in their own worlds now found themselves working, side by side, planting flowers, painting fences, and organizing events in Walter's honor. Conversations turned from mere pleasantries to shared memories and hopes for a safer, kinder community. At the center of it all was Walter, a humble man who never sought attention but had become a symbol of resilience and respect. He watched the neighborhood come alive with a mixture of pride and gratitude, his heart swelling with the knowledge that his story had touched so many. Buddy, ever faithful, seemed to sense the change too. The dog trotted proudly beside Walter on their daily walks, tail wagging and eyes bright. He was no longer just a companion, he was a mascot of the neighborhood's newfound spirit. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned shades of pink and orange, Walter sat quietly on his porch, watching neighbors gather for a small block party. Laughter floated through the air, mingling with the scent of barbecues and blooming flowers. Walter's eyes met those of the Marines still visiting regularly, and a silent bond passed between them, a shared understanding that something extraordinary had blossomed from the darkest moment. The shove that had pushed Walter into the street had not broken him. Instead, it had pushed a whole community toward honor, healing, and hope. And in that moment, Walter knew that no one would ever walk alone again. Walter Jennings had never expected to find a family again, not after so many years of quiet living and loss. But the Marines who had come to his aid had become more than just protectors. They had become brothers and sisters in a new kind of bond. One crisp morning, as the sun spilled golden light across the neighborhood, Walter received an unexpected invitation. Sergeant Lisa Ramirez, the Marine who had first reached out to him, stopped by with a letter in hand. "Walter, there's something special happening this weekend. We'd like you to come with us." Walter peered curiously at the letter, which bore the emblem of the Marine Corps League. It was an invitation to a reunion, not just any gathering, but a ceremony honoring veterans and their families. Though nervous, Walter agreed. It had been years since he'd attended a military event, but the thought of standing among those who shared his history sparked a flicker of excitement. On the day of the event, Walter was escorted by a small group of Marines, Buddy trotting faithfully alongside. The reunion hall buzzed with energy, laughter, stories, and the unmistakable pride of those who had served. Walter's arrival was met with warm applause. Many recognized him from the viral story, and a few veterans approached with tears in sea, their eyes thanking him for his service and for inspiring the community. As the ceremony began, a young Marine stepped forward to speak. "Today we honor not only the sacrifices made on distant battlefields, but also the courage shown right here at home. Walter Jennings is a shining example of resilience and the enduring spirit of the Corps." Walter listened quietly, the words washing over him like a tide of respect. When the time came for him to speak, he stood with Buddy by his side, voice steady but full of emotion. "I never expected this," he began. "I served because I believed in something greater than myself. I never imagined that after all these years, I'd find that same belief renewed in my own neighborhood, and in all of you." The crowd rose, clapping and cheering. For Walter, this wasn't just a ceremony, it was a reminder that the bonds formed in service never truly break. Back at home, the Marines continued their visits, but now something had changed. Walter was no longer just their charge, he was their friend, their mentor, their inspiration. Private First Class Jamie Nguyen often sat with Walter, soaking in his wisdom and stories. One afternoon, Walter handed Jamie his old Marine Corps hat, the faded emblem catching the light. "Take this," he said. "Carry it with pride and remember what it means to stand for others." Jamie accepted the gift with reverence, understanding the weight of the legacy now entrusted to him. Walter's days grew brighter with the presence of his new family. They shared meals, celebrated holidays, and sometimes just sat quietly, enjoying the peaceful moments that came with trust and friendship. Buddy, too, became a symbol of the bond that united them all, a living reminder that loyalty and love could heal wounds deeper than any physical scar. The neighborhood had transformed, but more importantly, so had Walter. He was no longer alone or forgotten. Instead, he was at the heart of a brotherhood reborn, a community lifted by honor and kindness. And as Walter looked out at the setting sun, with Buddy by his side and the Marines gathered around, he knew this was more than just a new chapter. It was a promise, a pledge that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. The neighborhood's transformation was evident in every corner of Maple Street. Children played freely in yards once overgrown with weeds. Neighbors exchanged greetings that lingered with genuine warmth. The spirit of community had been rekindled, all sparked by one man's resilience and a dog's loyal companionship. Walter Jennings had become a beacon of hope and courage, his story inspiring people far beyond his quiet block. Local schools invited him to speak during assemblies, where he shared lessons not just about service, but about kindness, respect, and never giving up. One spring morning, Walter received an invitation from the city's mayor. The letter was formal, but heartfelt, inviting him to a special ceremony honoring veterans and community heroes. The mayor wanted Walter's story to be celebrated as an example of strength and unity. The day of the ceremony was crisp and bright. Walter, dressed in his best suit with his Marine Corps cap perched proudly, arrived at the City Hall accompanied by Buddy and a small contingent of Marines who had become like family. Inside the Grand Hall, families, veterans, and community leaders filled the seats. Walter was greeted with standing ovations as he took his place at the podium. He looked out at the crowd, feeling the weight of the moment. "Today," Walter began, his voice steady but warm, "we honor the spirit of service, not just in the battlefield, but in our everyday lives. Each of us has the power to protect, to care, and to uplift those around us. My journey has shown me that no matter how old you are or how far you've come, you can still make a difference." His words resonated deeply. Many in the audience wiped away tears, moved by the humility and strength in Walter's voice. After the ceremony, the mayor approached Walter with a smile. "Your story has touched so many," she said. "We'd like to name a community park in your honor, a place where families can gather and where your legacy of service and kindness will live on." Walter was speechless, overwhelmed by the honor. The park would be a lasting tribute, a symbol of the unity and compassion that had grown from a moment of hardship. Back on Maple Street, preparations for the dedication ceremony began. Volunteers planted flowers, painted benches, and installed plaques telling Walter's story. Children practiced songs to perform, while neighbors coordinated refreshments. The day of the dedication arrived, drawing a large crowd. Marines stood proudly, local officials spoke warmly, and families celebrated together. Walter cut the ribbon with a steady hand, Buddy wagging his tail beside him. As Walter toured the new park, he paused by a bench engraved with the words, "In honor of Walter Jennings, a veteran, a friend, a beacon of hope." The words stirred something deep inside him. His journey, from being pushed into the street to becoming the heart of a community, was more than a story of survival. It was a legacy rekindled. That evening, as the sun set over the park, Walter sat quietly with Buddy, watching families. Play and laughter filled the air. He felt a profound peace, knowing that his life's trials had led to something beautiful and lasting. Walter's story was no longer just about one man and his dog. It was about the power of kindness, the strength of brotherhood, and the enduring impact one person can have on the world around them. And as Buddy rested his head on Walter's knee, the old veteran smiled softly, ready for whatever the future might bring. Years passed, but the spirit of Walter Jennings and the story of his journey never faded. The small community that had rallied around the 90-year-old veteran and his loyal dog Buddy continued to thrive, nourished by the seeds of kindness and brotherhood Walter helped plant. The park named in Walter's honor became a gathering, place for celebrations, remembrances, and everyday moments of joy. Children played beneath towering trees, families picnicked on sunlit lawns, and veterans met regularly to share stories and support one another. The legacy of one man's resilience had grown into a living testament of hope. Walter's health, while steadily declining with age, never diminished his spirit. He remained a fixture on Maple Street, his daily walks with Buddy still a ritual, now often accompanied by young Marines and neighbors who had come to love him like family. One crisp autumn afternoon, as leaves painted the sidewalks in vibrant shades of orange and gold, Walter felt a gentle weariness settle over him. Surrounded by those who cared most, Marines, neighbors, family, he knew his time was drawing near. But even as his body grew frail, Walter's heart was full. He had seen the power of community, the strength of loyalty, and the unbreakable bonds forged in service. He had lived a life that mattered, not just through his own courage, but by inspiring others to stand up and care. On his final day, Walter sat peacefully on the bench in the park that bore his name. Buddy rested at his feet, his faithful companion, until the very end. Marines stood quietly nearby, their presence a shield of honor. Walter's voice, though soft, carried the weight of a lifetime. "Remember," he said, "it's not the battles you fight alone. It's the people you stand with, the family you choose." His words lingered in the crisp air, a final gift to the community that had given him so much. When Walter passed, the entire town mourned the loss of a hero, a friend and a guiding light. Flags flew at half-mast, and a memorial service was held in the park, where stories of his courage and kindness were shared amid tears and smiles. But the true tribute was the ongoing spirit of the neighborhood. Walter's legacy lived on in every act of kindness, every hand extended to help, and every moment of respect shown to those who had served. Buddy, now older but still loyal, continued to walk the streets with those who had come to love him. He was a living symbol of the enduring bond between a veteran and his community. In the years that followed, Walter's story inspired others beyond the town's borders. Schools adopted his story in lessons about courage and compassion. Veteran groups shared his journey as a beacon of hope. And wherever the story was told, hearts were touched and lives changed. Walter Jennings had been pushed into the street, but he had risen again, lifted by the brotherhood of the Marines, the love of a dog, and the unwavering kindness of a community. His life was a powerful reminder that no matter the challenges faced, the human spirit can endure, inspire, and transform. And as the sun set each day over the park that bore his name, the world remembered a 90-year-old veteran who never walked alone.